It's fair to say that the announcement of Metaparks caused some, shall we say, buzz. So, as soon as I dropped my last video, I just had to reach out to the devs to see if I could cheekily ask someone firsthand. And to my surprise, the call was heard. So, armed with your questions, some of my own, and a little bit of excitement, I got to chat to Mike, the head honcho of the whole thing. Chacho meets honcho, if you will. And this is how it went. So I'm super excited and a little bit nervous about this, actually, because I was invited to talk about Metaparks by the one and only Mike. Hello, Mike.
Hello, Chacho. How are you?
I'm really good, mate. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for having me on here and for the chance to, connect with you and everyone on this.
Well, more importantly, thanks for coming on. I wanted to grab you as soon as I could, so I'm honoured that you decided to come and say hello. So I think we're going to waste no time, right? Because we've got a lot of people that have got a lot of questions. The community have been submitting them. So thank you guys for your questions. They are brilliant questions, right? Mike, you've seen them in advance. You're happy with everything?
Definitely. Absolutely. Yep. Really good questions there.
Amazing. And what I wasn't expecting, what we are going to get, is all of the stuff is going to be visual. So we're actually going to see the stuff in the game. So we're not just going to talk about it. We're actually going to do it. So Mike, first off, who are you?
Well, I am Mike. So I, started off started Metaparks 4 years ago after coming out of working at with design teams at other theme parks. My background is in game design, and so I just had this idea I was kind of toiling with. And, a couple of years of planning and designing, I finally committed to it. And, about a year ago, assembled a small team from our own community, and we've been working away at it. And since then, we've delivered our first playable towards the end of May, and we're finally ready to kind of come out and share with everyone that we're what this is all about.
Amazing, thank you. And the reception to the trailer has been incredible, right? How's that feel? How does that feel?
Really good, overwhelming in some ways. So, initially we were, kind of saying, okay, we got to let the community know about this. We're ready to let it grow, and it's going to get out there. We want to be the first ones to tell them. And so that's sort of where that started. But of course, that created a big splash, as everyone sees. And so now we have a lot of questions to answer.
We do.
To say the least. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, let's jump into it then. So the first one is from Joshua.
Sure.
Probably familiar. The one I think he is the person that's behind all the arcade stuff in Planet Coaster 2. So you've got a big one here.
Oh.
So how many developers are involved?
So right now we're a core team of 12. And we have a lot of support surrounding the project. So a lot of advisors, a lot of consultants around that have kind of accumulated over the course of a few years.
So next up then we've got Danny Seville 2543. The question there is, it's a pretty simple one really. How are you going to differentiate this from Planet Coaster? What's the elevator pitch and why should I buy this?
Yeah, so Metaparks is different because, and apart from just building, the world's best theme park and kind of just, looking at it, you can build it and jump in and experience it. And not only that, but you can experience that with friends. So that's a huge differentiator, and it's really grounded in reality, where all theme park designers and enthusiasts, and so some of the things that you're building are rooted in practical effects and like how you do it in the real world.
Love it. And that's the thing, right? The game's broken up into 3 core elements, right? So you've got the Tycoon element, the MMO element, and the RPG element. So you're essentially designing 3 games in one.
Sure.
Are you mad? Is that what's going on?
Well, you could do an awful lot more than that too. It's a really cool design, really, really good idea. And even with just the core mechanics that are there now, we already have those 3. But I'm sure people have been talking about doing all sorts of things already. So a lot of it remains to be seen.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So just to let you know, over in the UK and the EU, we've got something called the GDPR law, which means that people have the right to be forgotten. So we've got some anonymous questions. So some users that have asked to not be named, which is fine. So I've removed the names here. So the next question there is, so you've asked for 120k on Kickstarter. So what's that actually going to be spent on?
Yep. So as I said, the team just recently delivered a really strong first playable. We're ready to take it to the next level. And as you can see, with everything that we have already developed and we're ready to expand upon, we're going to need a lot of help. So the very first thing that, so apart from, typical fundraising efforts, which are happening behind the scenes, we need to show a strong, basically demo and, player interest. We have those. But then the Kickstarter is to kind of accelerate creating that opportunity for people from the community. You know, we have some that are writing music already, some that are helping us moderate and, you know, do some community management. You know, we want to be able to, you know, compensate for that, and then also, you know, grow the product so that we can reach our next goal, which is at the end of the summer.
Nice. So with that in mind, another anonymous question. Is there a roadmap available?
Not quite yet, but we're actively working on it. We are going to use Codex to create a publicly visible roadmap with all the features we've kind of mentioned. Your wish list will be on there, and we'll be actively working it. We're going to make a lot more, you know, facing the players.
So that's the project stuff then. So we've got a couple of other questions coming in about style graphics and the game engine itself. So we've got the first two questions are really similar. It's coming from Habisano404TM and also Coaster Movie as well. So the two, well, actually it's multiple questions, but the two fundamental questions: will Metaparks aim to be more fantasy and neon futuristic-ish in style, or will it be a more realistic, authentic theme park builder? And the second question there is the game going to be a more realistic theme park game or a fantasy and more unrealistic game, a little bit like Park Beyond?
So I can show you a couple of things. And so overall, you know, we are setting out to make a very realistic theme park builder. And so that means some of the materials and pieces you'll use will look a bit synthetic, as you'd expect. You know, it'll go as far as, you know, some pieces that have rock work on it will show, you know, the iron behind it. You can make some really cool backstage areas. And so that's sort of how we're, you know, setting the bar at realism to that level. But we can have many pieces that are, and even the things that are in there already, and there's plenty more to come, should give you enough flexibility to really create that look you want.
Awesome. So we're seeing a piece-by-piece builder, right? That gives you a very familiar
Absolutely.
way of pulling buildings together quickly, right?
Right, absolutely. It is a piece-by-piece builder. We don't want to do much of the building for you, if at all. We want to make it easier to build and make it feel like you could build anything. But we're definitely keen on, you know, keeping and preserving that creative problem solving that is what makes, you know, sandbox simulators fun.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. So the next question we've got coming in is Captain Trash Panda. That's, are they using Nanite in Unreal Engine, and will you have full path tracing? I'm going to park the Coaster Builder question because I think we can answer that later.
Yep. So the short answer is yes. Like, so we're using Nanite where it makes sense. The Ferris wheel is a good example of that, and we're able to achieve a much higher poly count. Obviously, we're benefiting a lot from Nanite with that. But then, you know, in some areas where we don't, are, you know, obviously the translucent surfaces, you know, and then on some of the low poly stuff. And luckily, with a lot of the modular building pieces, they are very low poly, so it's very performant. As far as like path tracing, ray tracing, that is definitely going to be hardware, you know, contingent on the hardware. We plan to have, you know, a plethora of settings for you to tailor and experience, and you know, but overall, we're aiming for, you know, really modest hardware to be able to run this really well, and so things like, you know, ray tracing and you know, path tracing will probably be on the fringes of that for the higher performing machines.
Awesome. Well, that comes into another anonymous question we've got then, is how are you going to optimize for different hardware profiles in Unreal?
Well, the thing about Unreal is it's a good choice because it you know, makes that, you know, cross-platform very feasible. You know, and so there's a lot of technical things to go into with that, but essentially it starts with a really good foundation and direction on that. We're thinking about optimization from, you know, day one. Even the things that are in here are, you know, running really well, you know, and we have a lot of strategy to, you know, keep it that way. With the target hardware is, you know, well within the range of, you know, consoles, PC, and then we want to get it down all the way down to VR, which is essentially having it run on Android. But that will take a little bit more, you know, obviously a little more work.
Awesome. Last question on this section then comes from Mr. Maverick. And what level of mod support is the game going to have?
Another good question. So it's one of the things that'll remain to be seen for a bit. You know, so when they first introduced that to, you know, other theme park builders, in some way we noticed that, you know, it sort of shunted the creative side of it. You know, if you could model and import anything you want, it almost takes away from the charm of, like, you know, that creative problem solving. So we're taking an approach of, like, making sure that people have what they need. You know, they won't have to kit bash branches together to make tables, you know, but at the same time, they will have to use that creative side of their brain to, you know, really impress people in their park. We think that that's important, but then, at least to start with, but then as the platform develops, we're gonna, really pay attention to what you guys are reaching for. Like, why are you modding it? Is it just to have fun? Is it because you need something that's not there? We'll kind of start there, and then I think, would have that discussion, well after release, if there was going to be some kind of mod support or something. We essentially just want you to have fun, and have what you need to build, at all times.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. So the next batch of questions then, well, there's actually only one question in this section. It's weather, right? So
Sure.
the question that's come in is Smiling Goma. 3334. So, will the snow accumulate or be similar to the snow in Planet Zoo? And will we be able to control the weather to create certain coaster experiences?
Ooh, Alma, good questions, and yes to all of that. So here's a good example of that. In our first playable, guess we'll start with a thunderstorm.
Oh my god, it looks so good. So the question there, though, can it snow?
Yep, absolutely. Let's do that.
And does it accumulate?
It sure does. You can see the ground's wet, and we start to see it accumulate in the cracks here on the boardwalk, and then eventually.
How high up does it go in accumulation, right? Because obviously it's accumulating over time. How deep does it get?
It looks like about an ankle deep snow. Definitely changes the whole atmosphere of it pretty quickly.
It really does. Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
And I'm all for a snow scene, right? Where everything
Same.
goes that lovely grey and the light just flickers off it. There's just a magical thing about snow that I absolutely love.
Truly.
Absolutely love it. Awesome. All right, thanks, Mike. So the next question then's come in from Jam Jars, and I think this is probably a hotly contested question, right? How much of the focus is going to be placed on management systems, because this is where other games fail? So will office, marketing, staff make up a big portion of the experience, be park staff only, that sort of stuff?
Right, absolutely. So park management is the fun of it to us. We love that kind of, the whole park operations, behind the scenes. And the focus is on that. We know of a lot of ways to improve on what's already out there. We have some really clever ideas, and kind of rooting that in what it's really like to manage a theme park, without making it overwhelming for the casual player, of course. But then something new that is kind of layered on top of that is live guest management. So of course, in a multiplayer game, you're not only managing NPCs, which is, a full-blown Tycoon game in that way, but you also have other things to consider, and live guests might have needs or wants or preferences, that you'd want to weave into your park designs as well. And and they can jump into the park, and just like you, they can drop behind a location, work at a location, and kind of like help out or shop, and the park owner benefits from that.
Right. So what we're saying there then is that you can either have your NPC players; those are the ones that are like created by the game, and they're the ones that will just manage the shop, and they do all of that autonomously. Or as part of the RPG stuff, you can drop into a shop and work the shop.
Yeah, so absolutely. Yep. So a mix of both. So right now we have some form of NPCs here. Of course, they're a little stiff, but there's a lot going on in their mind. They are kind of tracking everything they can interact with, and so this is like kind of the the earliest form of an NPC. There'll be a lot more on that as we develop it. So they are going to go around to these locations, making those, making purchases, driving revenue, like all rolling up into park management, and then depending on how you want to approach that, you can of course hire an NPC staff. There's a lot more immersive staffing, but and we call them roles. You can jump down into your avatar and actually get behind a counter and fulfill that role, to kind of help a location if needed, boost revenue, and just have fun.
So I've got a question that I'd like to put forward, just based on what you've said there. Backstage, how is all of that going to work? Like maintenance and stuff, how's that going to work?
Oh, they'll absolutely be functional. So there'll be plenty of things to work with on the backstage. You have a whole plan for park ops and the different components you can place in your own parks, to whatever degree you want to. We know as park designers, the majority of theme parks are actually behind the scenes. And so we weave that into the RPG elements of it, where, kind of as you're progressing as a character, you spend quite a bit of time back there. And we want to, sort of create that experience of, being, behind the scenes and then stepping into the actual park with live guests, and that transition is quite an experience in real life. And so we hope to kind of recreate that, as well on our own. But of course, for those that just want, they're a little more casual, they can just build a core park, and those systems shouldn't really, overwhelm them or, complicate the experience.
Awesome. So I'm going to have a choice then about how much I interact with backstage. So if I want to go full on realistic and run a park as a park, then I can. But if I just want to let the systems do its thing and I just want to plop and play, as I call it, then that's also an option to me as well, right?
Absolutely. Yep. And that's very important to balance that, because it can be overwhelming to, create, just for some, to create a whole park with the backstage infrastructure. But at the same time, we want that, right? So it's there. But with many things, it's like how much you want to engage with it is up to you.
So the next question is coming from ECW Fanatic 22. It's all around the pathing system. And the question is, will there be grid-based queue line creation to make cattle penning easier?
That's a great question. So yes, absolutely. Our first playable here was all built on what we call foundations within our pathways and plazas utility tools. So essentially, it is all grid-based, and yes, you can use that to create the grid-based, cattle pens and switchbacks. I can show you a little bit of that here. But then it also works in conjunction with a spline-based path tool, which I'll send over some prototype footage for. The idea is, with Metaparks, you're creating a lot of interiors, and so you can start with a base or a floor, build walls up around it, and that has to be traversable by not only avatars but NPCs. And so we find that this grid-based, foundation features the best route for that.
Nice. So the stuff that you've got there, then the grid-based stuff, that's got like hitboxes and boundaries. So an NPC and an RPG player will know instinctively that it can't leave that space. Is that right?
That's correct. So NPCs definitely, but what we're kind of learning as we're kind of in here, like jumping around as avatars, we're jumping off of rocks, and it's kind of posing the question like, well, what is a path anyway, right? So in a theme park, pathways are like the most our most prominent feature, and so they span vast areas, and so we have these really big, nice foundation pieces. Like this is made of two here, that kind of come together as a circle. You can create some really interesting patterns very quickly and cover a wide area. And then of course you have the smaller pieces where you want to build like a different path for a queue or something that will assist you there. And then for everything in between, the spline-based pathing tool, like similar to what you're used to. And then in addition to that, we are working with stairs and elevators. We call them up-downs. And so between that, you can create some really cool buildings with interiors, with horizontal and vertical flow. And of course, hook that right up to a path on your park if that's what you'd like to do.
Nice. I heard interiors and that was it. I was gone.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got a load of questions now coming in about gameplay itself, as you can probably imagine. First question's coming in from Dirty Diamond Movies. That's one element of gameplay we haven't seen outside of No Limits is the ability to operate rides placed in our park. So talking full operational mode with ride attendants. Not really a question, but more of an overall statement in the hopes that we may see something in the future.
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. The ride operator is a role that you can step into as an avatar, and it turns into a little bit of a mini game. But that's not fully implemented yet, but there's a lot more on that to come.
So that box there, that would be where the console is, right?
Yes, so you'll have a control panel that you'll be able to interact with, and then the mini game starts from there. And apart from operating the ride, you're also trying to do that efficiently and a whole bunch of other things, that makes that a lot of fun.
Nice. Random question: is that control panel fixed to that location, or can I move it?
No, you can certainly move it. The mini games are more camera based, and so you can put this sort of anywhere in a tower, wherever you'd like. But then, when you interact with it, you can also choose. It'll snap right to the station in a convenient view.
Nice. All right. So the next question we've got then has come in from Wild Mouse X U5 5D. Functional parking lots. If not now, when?
Right, not soon enough, right? So yes, functional parking lots are a thing. Pavement that pays you. It's a huge part of theme park infrastructure. We already have the beginnings of it here, and that will tie into park management. Of course, like with other things at this scale, it's one of those things where you can sort of choose to have your park or not, and then how far. We have some really awesome ideas for this, and if we get there, you could take it pretty far.
So I've got a bit of a follow-up question, if you don't mind, Mike. That's about what we're
Sure.
seeing now, right? So that's the car park and everything. You just said obviously it's
Yep.
all optional
Yeah.
to have there. That main building, we're not going to be tied to having that in our parks for every park, are we? Right? We can just choose a blank slate and go from there.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. So this was just a resort example. We really wanted to stretch the modular building system, and then create like a heart of Metaparks with this. But that's correct. There's only a few modular things that you're required to have in the scene for it to be considered a Metapark, or a park in general. So one of those would be, for example, the elevator, which would be, a spawn point for NPCs and for live guests. But where you put that and what you've built around that is completely up to you. We'll start you off with something modest.
All right, so next question. This is a really hard username to say, right? I think it's Jammy B Slice of Pie. I've just butchered someone's name, and I'm running with it, right? How deep is the gameplay simulation envisioned to be? Will it be a deep management game, or is this going to be mostly creative focused?
Well, it's absolutely both. Like I said earlier, we don't intend to make an ocean that's only an inch deep. You can expect incredible immersion from the RPG aspect. A lot of that's already forming, but also at its core it is that theme park simulator. So incredibly powerful, intuitive tools. So that you can whip up the park of your dreams as well.
Awesome. All right. And Alton Towers Obsessed 13 has asked, how will the building system work? For example, will it be piece by piece like Planet Coaster 2, or will it include the ability to create your own items in a similar system to TMTK and Planet Coaster 1?
So the short answer for that is definitely piece by piece. But what we are doing with that is providing more pieces and more flexibility, so that you can get a lot more control, and build some really impressive stuff.
Awesome. All right. So then we've got. I'm going to butcher someone else's username, by the way. Elderwit2638. I'm so glad I'm not selling these usernames. So, is the game going to be more realistic with detailed backstage areas and maintenance bays, etc.?
Absolutely. So this is one of my personal favorites, is the backstage stuff. We're already using it in development, amongst each ourselves. As you can see here, if a piece is ready, we place it down, kind of send it down the line. So it's really interesting. This is almost like how a real theme park would be created. There are spaces like that look like this. But as far as how this weaves into the RPG element, if you were to receive a ride system, it might show up in a warehouse first, and so there's a lot there, that can be a lot of fun and immersive with the backstage stuff.
Oh, nice. So, are we talking potential research trees then, where you research something and it lands in the maintenance bay for you to go and check out, or am I reading that room completely wrong?
No, you're reading it completely right, but it's a little bit of a difference between making an agreement with a ride company and having a ride system available now, and having that delivered, and having that be part of an RPG aspect, rather than you kind of grabbing something from the train and just placing it down. So there is a skill tree progression for all of the lines of business, and so you might start with a vending machine and end up with a restaurant, right? And everything is sort of like that. But with attractions specifically, if you were to spend X amount on a huge attraction, there is a process there where you do receive that, and that's a big part of what it's like working in a park, and we want to have some element of that in the RPG at minimum.
Okay, so next question then is coming from Alexander Newhouse, and that's, are you bringing back square queue lines?
Yep. So the square queue lines are definitely part of that with the foundations. So you should be able to create piece by piece on a grid, if that's the question, I think that's kind of what they're
Yeah, so does that work
what they're
similar to how
asking.
you were talking about paths?
Yeah. Yep. So, but the thing with queues though is that you can choose, to make a grid, but then also sort of choose the direction in which traffic should flow on it. And so each path piece that you place that is on a grid, if it is set to be a queue, that would be, how you set that up.
Yeah, great. Sorry, this is another sideswipe question. The queue line textures, are they
Whereas,
the same as the path textures?
so far they are, but when we go further into when we go further into development and we start adding a full library of textures and things, that might change.
Yeah, cool. Okay, awesome. So this is another one of the anonymous questions. Will there be NPCs or is it only populated by visiting players?
Oh, absolutely NPCs. That is probably the core of it. When a live player or group of live players visits your park, it's a very special thing.
So real-time build. This is another anonymous question. Real-time build systems for rides. Are they instant builds or are they going to be built up over time?
I'm not sure I understand that one. Hang on,
So I
let me.
think where this is probably coming from is there going to be like a blueprint system where you design the ride and then it
Oh,
builds up
okay.
over the game time, it's ready for a
I
launch, or
understand,
is
like a
it
construction
instantly built?
period. I see. Okay. Right now, it's planned to be instantly built. Once you unlock that and place the ride down, it is available if it's set up correctly. Um, like I think there's no construction period or something where you like kind of place it down and have workers come and set it up.
All right, so it's going to work similarly to other Tycoon games that we're familiar with. Then,
Yes.
like so, you
Yep.
basically choose it from a palette and you plop it down, and then it's there and ready
Yep.
for you.
Absolutely.
Wicked. All right, so the next question's coming from Roger1. How much is the focus on theming compared to the coaster builder? Because in the preview, the theming looks really nice, but the coaster physics look a bit weird.
Definitely. A lot of things. There's a lot of spackle on the wall still with the first playable. So again, that's like right after prototype. Everything to us looks about as weird as the coaster. We have a long way to go. Um, but in general, right now, the game is T-shaped. So it's deepest in the build system because even with the fanciest rides, we still need a good system for you to be able to, grab that ride and put it down from the pallet. So our focus is really making that feel good. Um, but it's definitely clear that based on these comments, people are like, well, is this a theme park game or what? And absolutely, like we hear that we'll have a lot more on attractions as soon as we can. There's a lot of really exciting things happening behind the scenes there. A good example of just kind of like set the bar would be the Ferris wheel. This one is complete. We think it looks great. It's performant. This is sort of the benchmark as far as the visuals go and rides at the same time.
Yeah, of course. It takes time to model this stuff, right? So you've got to focus on something to do
Yeah.
a prototype, and
Right.
yeah, and I expect
Exactly.
you've got to have like conversations with ride manufacturers about likeliness of ride. Not like, is that the right word? About how the ride looks. Like, does it look like their ride, and can you do that? Is that right?
Right. So there's a lot of that factored in. There's a lot of conversation happening anyways. But that's definitely part of it. But really it does come down to bandwidth. With a small team, we want to deliver, big on anything we do. And that includes the rides, of course. So, now, just to put it in perspective, that the Ferris wheel was one that we had our team we're partnering with, create, and that came out wonderful. But for just about everything else you see in the game, I 3D modeled myself. I had to teach myself Maya, very early on, and once all of these technical systems were in place, um, we needed assets to work with, and so I just kind of learned through it, modeled and textured everything here. But again, it being so early, that's totally good. It looks okay for now, but we do have big plans for the visuals to have like really to come a lot further, by the time you guys get in your hands. And that does include the coaster. And so I was proud of this for one of my first big models. We need a lot of, we need help from artists in all disciplines. At this point, we're just ready for that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like with doing a game like this, is big, right? So you need some
Yeah.
kind of expertise in that field to help you with it.
Absolutely. It's not only that, but it's like, it's sound, it's animation, it's texturing, it's modeling, it's designing, it's UI, UX, everything in between. And so we've been able to wear all the hats, to this point, but we are ready for people to plug in.
So the next question is another anonymous question, and it's how deep is the game going to actually be? Will there be economies, guest needs, dynamic attendance based on weather, time of year, seasons, etc.?
I didn't hear one thing in there that we haven't already discussed and planned. So I'd say it's going to be, very much in depth, and presented in a way that's not so much, overwhelming for the casual player, but does have the, many layers for those that choose to engage with it. As far as weathers and systems and biomes go, that's a pretty common question. We are using that weather system that has so much flexibility, and there are currently 7 biomes, that we have spanning from the desert to the coast. This one's called Temperate Lakes. This is where we're kind of starting on. And of course, the weather systems change there. That affects, things from wear and tear on the rides all the way down to the objects available for purchase in shops. So so I'd say it would go pretty deep.
And I think we can answer the next question already, but I'm going to ask it anyway because Callum Edwards has asked it. Will weather be in the game, and will it affect rides, and will you be able to evacuate from coasters?
Okay, so we talked about that as well. So yes, absolutely, the weather affects the rides, as I mentioned. As far as evacuations go, so coming back to the real world theme park stuff, if you were evacuated on a ride, you have a couple of different things. It could have been just run of the mill technical fault, or it could be because of an operational thing. In simulation game, it could be that you didn't maintain the ride and it broke down. So there's going to be some sort of trade-off for that, because or more or less some reward for maintaining things properly. And so when it's evacuated, when a ride's evacuated, you may choose to issue a gift to NPCs, which might preserve happiness, but at the same time it hits hard on cost. So it's more like that, rather than asking players to create a whole backstage egress on every single ride at every point like they are in the real world. That just doesn't seem, you could do it, but that's just not quite realistic for most players. So a good balance for us is there's some form of acknowledgement of what happens during an evacuation, and that's kind of where we're aiming now.
Yeah, awesome. So are we saying then that evacuations as a concept will exist, but you may not necessarily animate it and see it happening? You just deal with the consequences of it?
That's correct. There may be an animation. We would love to see some visual representation of it. But it's just not. We're just not there yet in development. But we know in concept. It should at least. If you choose to issue a gift. For the evacuation to the guests, that should affect park management.
Yeah, cool. Okay. And what we're saying as well is that weather would have an effect on the actual ride itself.
Definitely. So certain ride systems do better than others in weather. And so we know of that, and it will factor into how often some rides need maintenance.
So as we've been looking through the gameplay and looking through the rides, Greg5958 has got a question, and I don't think I've seen it yet, so maybe this is a new one. The question is, will they have ride operator employees who do more than just a single one standing behind a panel like they do in other games, like check lap bars, make it more realistic?
Yeah, so we saw the question, and actually that went right onto the wish list. So we have definitely, there's NPC staff that man the rides. There's more than one position. You may have load, unload in certain situations. Even on something like a Ferris wheel could have that. And so that, of course, affects efficiency and so on. But as far as going to that level of actually checking lap bars and stuff, that's that bubbled up there. So we added that to the wish list.
Awesome. There you go. First, heard it here first.
Yeah, we'll see. It's a cool idea. It's a cool idea.
No, Mike, that's it. You've said it now. It's happening. That's it. End of.
Okay.
All right, so as you can imagine, theme park game, coasters and rides are going to be a big deal in this one. So we've got a ton of questions about coasters, Mike, if you're up for it.
Oh, sure. Do my
So
best.
good answer. So H2 is the first question. Will the coasters be fully customizable? Like, can you create your own coaster cars, track designs, or different set designs?
Oh, all very good questions and a lot of good questions in one on that one. So there's going to be a lot more of this coming out pretty soon. We have a lot of things we're working on behind the scenes. But what I can tell you now is that essentially and what we have here now is you'll start with something like a coaster chassis or a ride system, customize or choose from a selection of like seats and restraints to give you that combination, and then ultimately put the fascia on or in select colors, material slots, and then eventually 2D vector based graphics. So you could get, this is kind of what we're targeting for, like, what you should be able to do. But like I said, there's a lot more kind of happening. So definitely hang tight.
So if we're wanting to visualize this then and put this into a familiar thing that's already happened elsewhere. Theme Park
Sure.
Studio had a similar system, right, where you chose a chassis, you stuck stuff on it, and then that became your coaster car. Is that the kind of vision that you're going for?
It sounds like it when you put it that way, but not quite. So the coaster chassis might only be compatible with certain things, especially restraints and seats, and then the fascia that's available on some models specifically. So then for the things that kind of give more flexibility, where you're kind of like bolting everything and letting it, kind of go around a track or a spline or something. We're looking more towards like something like parades with that. So ours will be quite a bit different, but we do know that people want to make their custom trains. But we also want to kind of stay grounded in realism where we can, and so it's just sort of a balancing act with it. And we have some really good ideas, and like I said, we can't wait to share them with you.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so I don't have to build a custom train then. I can just pull one off of the shelf as it's been designed, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Okay, so the next burning question that you probably won't surprise you: transfer tracks.
Okay, doesn't surprise me.
What's the deal?
Yeah.
So that one's coming from Go Coasters and also
Sure.
EPOO 13.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, transfer tracks, switch tracks. There's all sorts of things. Dynamic track elements are definitely part of this within the scope. What I'll say is I don't have too many specifics yet. But we do have Ginge. If you know anything about Ginge or Ginge Entertainments, he's kind of spearheading that, and so we're really, we're pretty confident what we'll have, at the end of the day for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, Ginge is a fan of the channel, let's say.
Yeah.
I've used his work actually in a couple of my parks. The stuff that he's designed
Yeah.
is incredible. So
Yeah.
awesome. I think this leads us quite nicely, though, onto the big burning question that I'm deliberately parking, right? Because everyone's asked it. Coaster Builder, how is it going to be? So this one is coming in from Toli RH and also rollercoaster_madness, but I have heard this one everywhere that I've been talking about this. So Coaster Builder, Mike, what's the deal?
The coaster editor is probably best described as a blend between, some things we're used to with the nice UI, spline-based, building with the tracks, and an FED sort of flow, where it's applying forces to a heartline on the train. So some with the coaster enthusiasts on one end, there's very stark contrast on who prefers what. And when we're kind of bringing this to a wide audience, we need ease of use to be at the kind of the forefront. So we might see something like, pretty typical, easy to use UI, but it's really just changing values behind on something like, what an FED would do. And would like to kind of explore exposing some of that stuff so that if you really wanted to get a little bit deeper and a little more technical, you can. So we're just, again, that's another one that's sort of like, there's a wide variety of preferences there. And we'll do our best to hit all the boxes.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so obviously we're seeing prototype footage here of the coaster.
Yeah,
So there's lots of stuff
very early
developed and whatever. Just notice, just for viewers that are watching this, FED. What does that mean?
or FVD, so it's
Oh,
like a
sorry,
force vector
FVD.
design.
Sorry.
Yep, yep. So it's just another way of. So in some situations, there's tools where you can apply forces to what's called like the heart line of a roller coaster. So like where your passenger's heart lines would be. And that's really how you measure like the comfort of what a coaster is. But there's ways that you can actually, kind of adjust some of those. You can address just that and get a result of a track that's changing. So some people find that more intuitive. Where you can change a curve on G-forces and have the track actually, change on screen. And so now I'm talking more conceptually. We're really developing just like the core of this stuff. There's nothing really to show on that yet. But we know of it, and it is a really interesting way to do it. And you get a lot of the control, and it solves a lot of the problems of coaster editors that are already out there. But on the other hand, we want, that sounds complicated, and people look at like a more of a graph type of thing. So we need to kind of somehow like engineer a way that makes that process as intuitive as some of the other things, and we think we know how to do it. And so, like I said, more on that to come. But we know that the coaster editor has to be, pretty perfect, to be honest.
Well,
You
yeah.
know,
So hang on.
yeah,
Are you saying then that if I'm shaping something and I want to shape it around a specific G-force, I can put that in as a parameter and it will shape the track around that rather than me having to change the track to match the G-force?
that's essentially what FED is. And that's the way that I personally prefer to build coaster tracks, because it does. It's a little bit easier than it sounds, but yeah, that's essentially the concept. So trying to take like the best of both worlds with that. But of course, before you can walk, you have to crawl, and so we're really getting control of like creating that spline in general, and that's like what you're seeing there in the prototype footage. So we want to make sure we can, a coaster can be just a spline and a cube moving around it, right? We want to make sure that's done really, 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 really well. And then we'll layer in the track. And once we have the track mission, then we'll layer in the trains, and then we'll layer in more trains, right? And so it's kind of just at that point where we need to get that feeling really, really good before anything else.
So
But
if
it's
you,
going to be, so to answer the question, it's kind of like a blend of both.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, if you can pull that off, that's a whole new way of doing coasters, right? That's gonna, rather than
it
having to
is.
edit
Yeah.
edit your track to match the forces, you can put in the force you
Yep.
want, and it will match the track to that. That's like a flip reverse of when in Panic
Yeah,
Coaster, for example.
right. Exactly. And those are the things we want to be careful of. Like we can innovate in a lot of places or be traditional, right? And we don't want to be too jarring or overwhelming with it because, we want to give everything, we want to give as much as we can, but have it like, grounded in reality. But there are some places where that would be helpful in building a coaster, especially if you're
Yeah.
trying to, have NPCs guests ride it and you're struggling with, the perfect curve or something, you could, it would be better to just kind of address those forces right on the heartline, which is what they kind of do anyways when they design coasters. So it so there's that whole aspect where it can be helpful as well, and less frustrating, but it's like it's really about kind of blending that together. And there was something else too. Oh, and another layer to it is, if you're used to kind of seeing the results of a coaster and like testing, we have another added thing, which is the live guest response. And so as the guests are on the trains, right now at the ride cam, there are controls to emote and to react, and that is all kind of like surfaces into the management of the attraction, and it's kind of converted to a heat map and concept. And of course, we're working on this, and you can sort of see where people enjoyed themselves or like hit the or smash the heart button, throughout the circuit, and that also helps you make improvements as well.
Well, I mean, I didn't even think that was even a thing, Mike. So first refusal on all of that when that's ready, please, because
Sure.
I wanna show that off.
All right.
So, as you can imagine, theme park game, lots and lots of wishlist stuff are coming in. Should we do a quick fire? I think I know the answer because we've only got one coaster in game and we've spoken about the
Sure.
development. But should we try our luck?
Sure.
Okay, so sorry, I didn't even get your permission then. Yes or no?
Yes, you could try. I can try too.
Awesome. All right, Vekoma launch coaster.
More to come on
More to
that.
come.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Interim
yeah.
Blitz.
Same, but we will have definitely LSM coasters are absolutely one of our favorites. So we'll leave
Okay.
it there. Yep.
Wicked. RMC Raptor.
Same thing with RMCs.
Same.
Absolutely love them. More to come. Yep.
All right. Awesome. I think we know the answer to these, but
Yeah, probably all of them.
motorbike coaster.
Love motorbike. They're my personal favorite. More to come.
Okay, and then mac and cheese 526 went straight in with everything. What mod going to be in game?
Oh, more to come.
More to come.
Lot to
Fair.
look forward to. A lot to look forward to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah,
So obviously
definitely.
you've
Just
got.
keep in mind, oh
No,
yeah.
go on. You go. You go.
I was gonna say, just keep in mind, like, Ginge is spearheading. We're really looking into like some of the newest stuff, some of the most loved stuff, the things the community is asking for, and we have a huge list. So it's lots to look forward to.
Well, tell Ginge to pull it out because we've got people that need answers, right?
Sure.
Cool, thanks, Mike. So, next batch of questions. Again, theme park game. You would imagine that we're going to have coasters and rides and stuff. So, a couple of questions about rides. First question has come from Jason Clune, 6348, and that's: will you focus primarily on realistic rides?
Yes, definitely. That's something we're really focused on. So realistic rides down to as much detail as we can. We're the type to stare at a friction drive motor for 30 minutes, for hours at a time. We appreciate the engineering and the construction that goes behind this and all the detail that goes into it. So every ride system should be like that. And like I said, the Ferris wheel is like probably a good benchmark for that. As far as like level of detail goes.
Are we expecting then all of the other rides to be a similar level of detail to this then?
Absolutely.
Cool. So I'm going to ask a random question, sideswipe question, if I may.
That's fine. No problem.
This level of detail that going into the rides is brilliant, right? And we've seen it before in other games. How does it affect the performance of the game?
Really good question. So that's one. If you remember from the question about Nanite, it does come down to a team that really understands, technical art. Which we've partnered with, and just sort of how it's constructed, poly counts and just how we're streaming textures and so on. But so it's a combination of things. But ultimately, we have a really good target, poly count that Unreal can handle for days, in theory, right? And then, utilizing Nanite on meshes where it makes sense. Somewhere it doesn't make sense is like the translucent areas, things that you can kind of see through. Other than that, they seem to be like very, very performant. We've really tested it with a coaster track. We stressed it out. It doesn't skip a beat, when we spam the whole map with coaster track. So, kind of hoping that holds true. And once we're profiling all the time, if we start to skip a beat, we'll adjust things as needed.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so are the rides going to age, like visibly? Will you see them
Yes.
gain rust and stuff?
Yes, absolutely. So the textures here, and this goes for every ride as well, this is planned in, where you will see rust and grunge appear. And so this will happen over time as it weathers, of course, in simulation. But then in something like a sandbox mode, you can control that level of grunge and rust so that you can kind of get the look you want as well. If you wanted to make like kind of like an apocalyptic park or something, you can make all the rides rusty and grungy.
Nice. Okay, so the last question on this section comes from Peppercorn Bing Bong. And how many log rides can I make?
As I suppose as many as you'd like, or is that your computer can handle. Yeah, we definitely love a good log ride.
Again, sideswipe question on that's just come to my head. Water physics in the log flume, or is it too early?
Oh, it's too early, but it comes up all the time. So when we address water, right now in the first playable, it's just a shader that we can place on things, and which is working out pretty well for us, by the way, in making some smaller pools and things. But water physics is definitely something I think, and we know people like to see that, in a river ride or a rapids ride. But that is a wait to see. What we can feasibly do.
Okay, cool. Right, so Mike, probably the big question everybody has got is about the Kickstarter, game development being very expensive, etc. So you've put it up there, lots of detail on there, and thank you so much for doing a deep dive with me today. I've learned so much, and it's great to see the game, like literally the flesh of the eyes of the game. It's been brilliant to do a deep dive. So you've got your target. What happens if it's funded?
So that would be great news for not only us, but for the community as a whole. So we want to really, like I said, we're ready to grow. We're ready to plug some people in, and we're looking at the community first. We already have some members of the community, doing things like writing music, focusing on QA, just kind of helping. And now it's becoming, it's taking up more and more time, so they definitely need something in exchange. And so first and foremost, we're going to get everybody caught up who deserves something that's already brought this to where it is, and then that will create, again, it'll sustain ourselves, for the next milestone, which is bringing more members of the community in for more QA testing and so on until we bring it to a viable state. Once whether or not that happens, we still have a lot of things, kind of happening behind the scenes. The Kickstarter really is, and just this announcement in general, we really got a lot out of it already. We have our first playable, and the Kickstarter itself already has proven there's a lot of player interest, and so that's just as valuable as well. So it's not a make or break it, but it would definitely, get us all there quicker and really open that up, and we're ready for it. So if and on that note, if you're someone who's into game development, I noticed a lot of Unreal experts in the comments. If anyone's interested from any discipline of gaming, we are hiring. So keeping that in mind, and then if you are interested, then definitely root for the Kickstarter because that's what it's going to create.
Awesome. Conversely, though, if it's not funded, what happens then?
Well, we carry on as we have. Like I said, we've been going on. This is like our project's almost 4 years old now. Even though we've been in development for a little over a year, just over a year. And this will, so the team is kind of, prepared to, keep developing the product, for as long as we can. But like I said, there's a lot more happening behind the scenes with that, and fundraising is an effort that never stops, in whatever way we can. So, if anything, I just, would, if it didn't, I would just ask that the community doesn't see that as something like it's not going to happen, or that it's like an all or nothing. I've seen some of those concerns out there. Really, we already have the bulk of the important. The importance of it is to show that market is there, and then that can go a long way for us in other ways. So
awesome. All right, well, so I'll leave a link to the Kickstarter down below anyway, so people can go and check that out if they like. And of course, today we've been doing the deep dive of the gameplay stuff, the theme park mechanics. So again, Mike, thank you for showing me the game. Of course, there's a big thing that we've not covered, and that's the RPG and the MMO stuff. Are you happy for us to come back and do another one?
Anytime, absolutely. Would love to get into that, see what you think.
Awesome. I'll collect some more questions for you then in that case. So the challenge to you is to answer them, and the challenge to the community is to ask them. Awesome. Mike, is there anything else that you want to close off with? How can we find out more information if anybody wants it?
Well, no, but first of all, just thank you for this, and and for everyone to comment, either on this post or just anywhere. We're learning a lot about some of the questions and information that you guys need, and so we're working really hard to prepare that. We'll have a lot more coming out soon. We're working on that roadmap, like I had mentioned before, where you guys will be able to kind of track our progress that way. So. Don't just spread the word if you know anyone who's interested in it, who wants to back something like this. It's a game of a lot of people's dreams, and we really hope I think we all want it to come to fruition. So if you guys have any questions, don't ever hesitate to reach out. Doing our best to respond. You can hop in the Discord and ask some questions directly. Comment on our YouTube or anything that any way you feel comfortable reaching out. We'll do our best to clarify.
Mike, thank you for your time. Thank you for everything, and I will see you again for the RPG deep dive.
All right, sounds good, Nacho. Thanks again.
Awesome. So there we go, an hour summary of a 5-hour call with Mike, and I can't thank him enough for his time. I must say, I'd even underestimated the project until I saw it. I'd heard things about it, but because I was away for the weekend where it was properly shown off, I didn't really get to see it. But this project is big, it's ambitious, it's almost ostentatious, but if they can pull it off, well, I just don't know what's gonna happen. So once again, a massive thank you to Mike, and a reminder that in this transaction I'm only a keen content creator. I have no other formal affiliation with the project, but you can guarantee that while I'll be following this closely, I'm going to be telling you about it when I can. See you soon.